Today, Bell CEO Mirko Bibic will testify before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. He's been asked to answer questions about recent layoffs, which saw, among other things, the sale of 45 of 103 regional radio stations. Bell also cancelled a number of local newscasts and replaced reporter-technician teams with multi-skilled journalists who can write, shoot, and edit their own work. Combined with layoffs and cuts also announced at the CBC and other media outlets, this has raised a number of questions about the state of journalism in Canada, which is what today's hearing is going to take a look at. So joining us this morning is Anita Lee, founder and editor-in-chief of local Toronto news outlet The Green Line and journalism innovator at residence at the Toronto Metropolitan University. Welcome to your morning.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
So according to Heritage Canada, more than 450 news outlets have closed since 2008, more than 60 since 2020 alone. So when we see the industry shrink at this pace, losing smaller independent outlets, how does that reflect the stories that are being told to Canadians?
I mean, it's quite alarming because journalism is a pillar of democracy. We are effectively a public service for all Canadians. So if you have many news cuts leaving a lot of news deserts, there's a lot of people who are not well served by media. And for a democracy to function, it needs to be representative. And there are a lot of voices that are missing from the conversation as a result of these job cuts. There's major impacts.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. You know, as we pointed out off the top, cuts and layoffs, that's an industry-wide problem. And in December, CBC and Radio-Canada slashed 10% of their workforce. They eliminated 600 positions, 200 additional job vacancies. And many of the positions are being cut, we know, at the local level. The midday newscast quickly becoming a thing of the past. Also, late evening and weekend broadcasts. What does that mean for journalists in Canada, particularly journalists of color?
Yeah, so a lot of these positions that are at the local level are where a lot of young journalists cut their teeth when they get started, where they train and they develop their skill set. And the other alarming factor is, so the Canadian Association of Journalists releases an annual diversity survey. And if you look at the statistics, a lot of the entry-level jobs at the lower level, unfortunately, are mostly populated by women and people of color. So when you see these job cuts, a vast majority of the people being impacted are those from, marginalized groups like women and people of color. So that's not, again, really a bad outcome for how representative journalism is and how representative our democracy is.
Yeah, somebody pointed, I've anchored local newscasts, and someone pointed out to me that where you see often journalists of color on air, at least on air, people of color know this, is in the weekend and in the midday or evening newscasts. So when you lose those broadcasts, you lose those people of color from your news teams. A survey that was done last year by the Canadian Association of Journalists found 80% of journalists identified as white. That number jumps to 83 when you go up the chain, specifically talking about supervisors in newsrooms. Fewer than 70% of Canadians, however, identify as white. So when our newsrooms are not reflecting our population, what is lost?
So you just get a lack of storytelling. And like I mentioned, this is essential. We are seeing democracies at risk and fall around us around the world. And like I mentioned, media is a pillar of democracy, and we just need to be able to reflect the diversity of stories. Canada is a multicultural country, and we're not doing the public a service if we are not accurately reflecting those stories. And the impact is that there's a lot of research that shows that people who do not get local news that's consistent and quality and reliable, they're less likely to engage civically, they're less likely to trust their neighbors, and they're less likely to vote. So the net effect is really negative on society.
What are you hoping then, Anita, to hear in today's testimony?
Well, I'm really hoping to see just a commitment to journalism across the country. We understand that journalism, many businesses or many journalism organizations are for profit. And of course, the bottom line does matter to some extent, but that because the news business is a different kind of beast in that it is, again, a public service. So it really just can't be about the money. We are providing a public good, and there needs to be investment in quality journalism. And effectively, a lot of these major corporations, when they consolidate news outlets, they are losing the trust of the public and they're losing audience. So it's just counterproductive. And so I really just want to see an investment, a reinvestment into news businesses, especially at the local level, to fill in these news gaps and to just, cause, just to stop the proliferation of news deserts in this country.
News deserts. Anita Lee, thanks so much for joining us today. We will be watching as well.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.